One of the most insanely awesome moments of the Justice League Snyder Cut was the reveal of a character long rumored to be making his debut in Zack's version of the film, John John's The Martian Manhunter. Obviously, the reveal of this character is a big deal due to his storied legacy and fan favorite status among DC Comics fans. So today I figured I would give you a little bit of history on the man from Mars, the last of the Martian species, the Martian Manhunter. Martian Manhunter made his comic book debut in Detective Comics 225, and I know what you're thinking. Nick, Detective Comics is a Batman book. I know, but in this case, Martian Manhunter's first appearance was not in the Batman story itself, but rather in the backup story located at the end of the book. It was called John Jones' Manhunter from Mars. World-famous scientist Dr. Mark Erdell creates a device he calls the Robot Brain, capable of studying time, space, and the cosmos. Upon turning it on, a beam of light transports a green alien before him, claiming to be able to read his mind and calling himself John Johns. It's quickly determined that this wasn't really intended to happen, and Johns may not be able to get home, so he's gonna kinda have to hang out on Earth until the scientist who accidentally brought him here can find a way to reverse the effect and send him home. And Manhunter's a pretty good sport about it. He's like, alright, I'll tell you what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna transform into a regular looking 1950s guy, and I'm just gonna go around and blend into society. You don't worry about it at all. However, the shock of all of this, seeing an alien, watching him shapeshift, all of these things causes Dr. Erdell to, die. Yeah, he's pretty soft. People were just softer back then. Old people would just die if they saw something too weird on TV. This is why the Snyder Cut actually took so long to come out. We had to be sure the population could handle it. Anyway, Manhunter is stranded on Earth waiting for a way back home and decides to become a detective. He changes his name to John Jones in order to avoid suspicion. And during this time on Earth, John does what anybody would do if they were on a planet for the first time. He goes sightseeing. And we also get to witness him using his powers. He's able to phase through cars, fly, and even mine gold from the sand and the sea. John decides that he can best help the planet due to the fact that it's relatively primitive compared to the Martians by becoming a police officer to help people. And he literally just walks into the first precinct he sees, asks to be a detective, and the chief is like, yeah, sure, I don't see why not. You're probably not an alien or anything like that, so yeah, he just gets a job being a detective. However, unfortunately, on his very first case, he was crushed by Doomsday and killed. And that ends the comic book history of Martian Manhunter. No, I'm kidding. Let's actually just get to his lineage and origins. Martian Manhunter was born on the planet Mars as John Johns. The planet Mars was once inhabited by a race of benevolent and mostly peaceful green Martians. The Green Martians referred to this planet as Ma'elka Andra, which is a nightmare to type and pronounce, so we're just gonna keep calling it Mars for this video. Also keep in mind that there are additional Martian species such as red Martians and the warrior race of white Martians. These species all evolved separately, but for the purposes of today's video, we're only going to be covering the green Martians. The Martians Myron and Shashin had two sons, John Johns and Malefic. Twins were incredibly rare within the Martian society, but even more so was the fact that John's brother was completely devoid of the ability to communicate telepathically, an inherent trait within the Martian people, or at least this is what we're led to believe at this time. John's name meant light to the darkness, and Malefic's name meant darkness in the heart. And hopefully you're picking up on this foreshadowing because it's gonna get pretty dark here in a second. John's mother, Shashin, was a powerful precognitive being, meaning she had visions of the future and had already foresaw that one son would be a champion of good and the other would be literally the worst. John described it best when he said, "We were blessed or cursed even before we drew our first breaths." Due to this, Malefic became somewhat of an outcast, and later in life, a recluse. From an early age, John and his brother had a number of issues between them, but John did his best to try and mentor his brother. All the while, his brother kind of grew up to despise him. John grew up to become a manhunter, or essentially what his species referred to their policemen as. He fell in love with a female Martian named Myra, and the two married, settling down, and they had a child named Kim. It was believed that Malefic chose the route of science and philosophy. However, it was rare for somebody to choose two disciplines in Martian culture. As time progressed, Malefic grew more and more, evil. He was horrible. It was revealed later that Malefic was not born without the ability to communicate telepathically, but instead he had used this inherent ability his whole life. However, after violating Manhunter's wife, he was stripped of his telepathic abilities and had his memories overridden to believe he had never had the ability to communicate telepathically in the first place. And this actually ends up being worse, because Malefic grew to hate the Martian species and developed a contagious mental virus known as the Hronmir's Curse. It was named after the Martian god of fire. All Martians shared a telepathic link to one another called the Great Mind. And this virus caused Martians who used their telepathic abilities to communicate with one another to profoundly believe that they were on fire. Within the Martian community, fire was greatly respected and feared. The Martian telepathic brain link was so strong that simply believing that they were on fire was enough to cause the Martians inflicted with this to spontaneously combust. This virus, forgive the pun, spread like wildfire, killing every Martian on the planet, including John's wife and child. Manhunter was able to seal his mind off from the rest of the species, and he confronted his brother, who was engineering the plot from the inside of Olympus Mons, the giant volcano on Mars. The two battled seemingly to the death. However, it's later revealed that Malefic did survive this battle. John is left alone on Mars as the last surviving member of his species, where he slowly goes kind of insane. Keep in mind that Martians were all inherently linked to one another. With the sound of your entire species in your head, you learn how to control that throughout your entire life. Now, with it being empty, John was essentially alone for the first time. It's when John is pretty much at his lowest point that he's transported off of Mars accidentally by the scientist Dr. Mark Erdel that we discussed earlier. Remember when we discussed earlier that the doctor who brought Martian Manhunter to Earth immediately died, within a couple minutes of him getting there? Well, DC retconned that and decided that the doctor didn't actually die. Instead, it's revealed that he brought Manhunter from the past, potentially thousands of years, right at the point when his species was eradicated, all the way to Earth's future. However, the psychic damage done to him was too great, and it took the doctor a long time to nurse him back to health mentally. We see John in his native Martian form, a form that is deeply personal and oftentimes is not shown to anybody, even other Martians. And after an unspecified amount of time, the two formed a very close mental bond. This allows John to rebuild his psyche and come back to the world as the champion we all know and love. Martian Manhunter goes on to be a founding member of the Justice League of America as well as Justice League International. And condensing 70 years of comic history into a few sentences is pretty difficult, but believe me when I say that he's one of the most important superheroes in DC Comics history. Manhunter does eventually confront his brother, who tracks him to Earth, where he battles John and is eventually defeated via the combined powers of John and the JLA. But Nick, yes, voice of my internet friends, didn't Martian Manhunter die? Yes he did. During the events of Final Crisis, Libra, a character who has long been manipulated by Darkseid, is able to kill Manhunter by using a flame-tipped spear. Martian Manhunter is then laid to rest after the event is concluded within the pyramids of Earth, similar to the architecture of his own home planet. But wait! Manhunter is later revived by the white light spectrum at the end of the event Blackest Night, where the Black Lantern Necron reanimates a number of dead superheroes in an effort to... Honestly, if you haven't read Blackest Night, what are you doing? Go read it. I'm not going to explain the whole thing to you. It's incredible. Anyways, Martian Manhunter is reanimated as a Black Lantern zombified version of his former self, where he does battle with the Green Lantern Corps and other DC heroes. Eventually, through the combined efforts of Hal Jordan, Kyle Rayner, and Sinestro of all people, the white light spectrum is able to reverse the effects of the Black Lantern rings, and the entity then chooses a number of dead heroes to return to life. Chief among them are Martian Manhunter, Aquaman, and Swamp Thing. Martian Manhunter has a number of really awesome powers in the comics. He's basically like Superman in the sense that he seems to just kind of get whatever power he needs in order to win. Green Martians are all natively telepathic, however, it took Manhunter some time to learn to use this ability with humans. Additionally, he can fly, he has super speed and strength, and he also has the ability to phase and shapeshift, which are very helpful skills if, you want to actually win a fight in your verse. As mentioned before, fire is a massive kryptonite to Martians as well, and I guess fire's kind of pretty hard to deal with no matter what species you are, but Martians especially don't like it. It's really more of a phobia than anything. Martian Manhunter has, at many points in comics history, been afflicted with a fairly crippling anxiety about fire as well, and I think you probably would too if you watched everybody you ever loved lit on fire by their own brain. And that is really about all I wanted to cover for Martian Manhunter. It was awesome to see him pop up in the Snyder Cut of Justice League, and he's been around for so long that it's almost comical how he hasn't had a live action film yet. I mean, he is a massive fan favorite character. It almost boggles my primitive non-Martian brain how it's managed to go on this long without seeing him. Thank you for watching this, and I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, consider giving it a like and subscribing. If not, I'm sorry. Sorry I let you down. This has been Nick with Key Issues, and remember the motto, Martian Manhunter over everything.